Hey everybody, welcome back to Appify Your Business. In this video, we're going to cover how to create a filter pane in your dashboard that's upfront and not hidden for the users. So when users view this dashboard, they see that they can filter on a set of values right away. So for example, here I have a status field, project, lower start date and upper start date range that I could filter on. So when I click these filter, my dashboard updates dynamically based off the values I choose in this filter pane. So at a high level, this is going to allow users to input values into a new table that we create called a filter table. And this table is only going to have one record. Users will only be able to update that one record with these different values. And then we're going to create a slice for our main table, in this case, tasks, that is going to be updated based off the filter values in the new filter table that we added. So we have a slice that'll be actively updated as users change their inputs into this filter condition. And that's basically how this is working here. This is the slice on the right side. This is the filter input mechanism. And when the user changes those values, this slice is updating based off the values that the user chooses. Just so you know, this is not required to actually to filter and filter search results in your application. In AppSheet, there is this filter mechanism with this little inverted pyramid that you can click on where any searchable field in your data table will allow users to choose values to filter on. So this is built in, and the way this works is any column in your data table, if you look at the attributes and scroll down to the bottom, there is this field here called searchable. So if a field in your app is searchable and this box is checked, that means that this column will show up in the filter itself and users can then search that field. Now, one of the limitations to this is that it's not shown by default. So if users aren't familiar with using AppSheet apps and are aware that this feature exists in the application, it may be more difficult for them to discover by themselves. So you have the benefit with this in that there's a filter that's up front when they go to a view and they could see it right away. The additional benefit to using this over the built-in condition is you could filter multiple tables with one filter pane. So you can combine, based off this example I'm presenting you today, you can actually combine and have multiple tables get checked under one filter condition. So these are just some considerations to consider whether this method is going to be right for you. And this could just be another tool in your skill set that you can use when your users may request this type of functionality. All right, so let's get into it. The first thing we need to do is to create a new table to record the inputs of the users so that they can input their filter preferences. So I'm going to go ahead into this table here and create a new table called filter. So for our filter table, we're going to add a couple columns here. The first one we'll demonstrate is the ability to compare values against each other. So it'll just be, we'll use a status field from our task table here. And then we'll also filter on project to present that as an option. And then we will create a date range in our filter. And we'll just focus on the start date for this example. And we'll allow the users to input a range of dates, basically to find a start date between two dates that are input in the filter here. So we'll have status, project, and then we'll have lower start date range. We'll just call it lower start date and upper start date. So now that we've added these to the table, what we need to do now is go into our application and add our new table. And you'll see that it shows up here and we just add it. And then we'll make sure that we only allow updates to this table. All right, so the first view we need to make is the view for the users to add their inputs to the filter. So this will be a reference type because we're not going to present this view for the users as a choosable view to go to, but it'll be included in a dashboard view, and you'll see what that looks like at the end. But we'll call this view filter. And because we only want to update an existing record, if you remember, we have our table here in the app, and we're going to have one record that's being used. So in the app definition, what we can do is target the view toward the filter table, and we're going to use detail view. So we'll get here, and when we create this detail view, you will notice that there's nothing showing here. And this reminds me that I should have added a key column to this table. You actually need one record in this table to start with, since we can't add anything to the table. So I'm just going to call this key as an example and put a 1 in. And that's all you have to do. We're just essentially registering one record with AppSheet. And this is also a reminder that we need to go regenerate our structure to pull in that change to the table. So here we are. We have our key added to the table. We're going to change our key column to the key column here. By itself, this detail view doesn't show much. It shows the key there, and we don't really want to show the key. We want to allow the users to input values to this detail view so that in our table now, when we sync it, in our app, when we sync it and we view this filter view, we can see that record in the view. This is going to require to use what's called a quick edit column in the detail view. So we're going to add our columns here: project, lower start date, upper start date, status column. Then for column order, we'll make sure that we only include our 4 columns. So the result is now we have a view where users can set values. And then for status, we'll also notice that we should include an enum for the status, which is going to be the same as our status column in the task management table here. So we have our status, not started and complete. We kept it simple. And so we can click on the eyeball here, and then we'll add not started and complete. So with this set, just to review here, we're adding quick edit columns to our detail view because these allow the app to update anytime the user chooses one of the fields without needing to hit the edit button. So when the user selects status, then the quick edit field updates the record directly in the application. So you can see here how status is updating as soon as I click that value. So now with our filter mechanism and our view created that is going to enable users to input values into the filter, we need to go ahead and create a slice for our filter to work. And this slice is going to be a dynamic slice in that it's going to be reading the values that the user inputs from the filter table and then calculating new results based on those values. And then we're going to use that slice in the dashboards themselves. So for the task management table, we'll go ahead and add a new slice, and we'll call this filter results. And then we'll go ahead and create an expression for our slice. So just to review, we have our filter table that has our inputs that we're going to be capturing from the user, what status they would like to filter on, what projects they would like to filter on, lower start date and upper start date. And then we have our task management fields here that we can then use to create results in that slice. So the first thing we're going to do is use the AND function in the application here. And this is going to ensure that we have, for each of the values and the conditions that we check, all of them have to be true. So this basically creates that filter effect where you have to choose where AppSheet is going to then filter on any of the records that match all the conditions that the user chooses in the filter. So we'll focus on status first and how to create that filter for status. So first we're going to we'll put in the field that we want to compare, and that's going to be status. And then we're going to go retrieve the value that the user input into the filter table here. And because there's only one record in the filter table, we can go retrieve that value simply by typing any and then filter status in square brackets here. This works because we're essentially retrieving the list of all the statuses from the filter table, which is going to be just one record. And then we're telling AppSheet just pick any record from that one value. You could also use lookup if you want to, but it's going to be a simpler way to do it for the purposes of this demonstration. And that's all we need to do. So now we have this filter in place where we're going to check to make sure any of the records that make it through the slice filter is going to be equal to the status in the user inputs in the filter table. And then we'll continue to do this also for project. And we'll use any again for project. And then we get to the date range. First, we want to make sure that we're checking for the lower start date range here. So we're going to make sure that start date is going to be greater than the lower start date range. So that's going to be filter lower start date. And we'll go less than or equal to. And then we'll add the upper range for start date as well, where start date is going to be less than or equal to any filter upper start date range. Using these two inputs in the and, where we're checking if start date is going to be greater than the lower bound that the user inputs, greater than or equal to. And then we're also checking to see if start date is going to be less than or equal to the upper bound. The result is we have these four conditions that AppSheet is going to check in the slice, and anything that passes all four of these conditions will make it through the filter and be presented in the view that's connected to that filter. All right, so now with the core functionality created in our data structure, we now need to create the views that are connected to the filtering mechanism, which is the slice, if you recall. And in our case, since we only have one table, then we can create a new view for filtered tasks. And for task management, we're going to associate that, and we're going to associate that with the filter results slice. And I'm going to just use a deck view for this view. We'll once again make this a reference type view so that users can't navigate to it. Then we're going to go ahead and create a dashboard view, and we'll call this filtered dashboard. And we're going to add entries here of our filter mechanism here, our detail view, and we'll use a tall view as a tall pane for this view. And then we're going to add our filtered tasks as well. We'll give it a quick icon here where we're basically showing a filter. So go ahead and hit save. And then we'll go ahead and open up our application to our filter dashboard. So you'll see that we now have our filter in place here with our filtered task table. So this is the input where users can choose their filter conditions. Then on the right side, you have your filter results that are updated in real time. So you'll notice when I change values, my filter gets updated. So it looks like we're done here, right? But we're not. So one of the problems right now that we haven't addressed yet is the fact that what if a user doesn't add a filter to a specific field here? So I've kind of went ahead and pre-populated all the fields here to show a result from my table. Now, what I didn't show you is when you actually remove a filter from the table. So let's remove complete here and simulate a user not having a preference for what status they want to view. You'll notice that my records disappear. Worse yet, if I remove any project to filter on, then I don't have anything, where we would expect the opposite to be happening, in that we want more records showing if they don't fall into that filter condition range. We would anticipate that we would see all projects and all statuses in between these two date ranges. So how do we fix this? We're going to go back into our app editor to our filtered tasks or filtered results slice and take a look at our formula again for this filter. If you recall, we're using and here to check to see if every value is going to meet this condition. So in the event that status is empty, then AppSheet's checking that, right? And seeing if there's any column out there where the status is empty. Well, that's not going to be true in the case of status, right? Because status is always going to have some value. So this logic by itself doesn't work. And the same for project ID. All the tasks are associated with the project. So we need a different way of figuring out this condition. So we need to improve the logic here to check if the status and the project ID, if they're empty, then we actually just want AppSheet to not filter on those conditions. So to do this, we need to check if the filtered field is empty or not, and then determine whether to use that condition or not. So we'll do this by using an if function in our app, where we're going to check if the filter, the column is blank. So we can just copy this any and reuse it over here. And we're just going to check if this input by the user is blank. If it's blank, then the result is going to be true. If it's not blank, then we'll actually use the filter condition that we set before. And true has the effect here in that when AppSheet is reviewing the inputs and is reviewing the conditions in the AND function, it just treats this line as true. And therefore, all the records for this particular line will be valid and including in the filter slice. So now we'll just go ahead and repeat all this for each additional line in the application. All right, so with this completed out, we're ready to go ahead and hit save and see the results in action. So now, with our updated slice condition in place, we will now accurately see all of the tasks showing in our view here. And then when we apply a filter condition for status, we'll see that our column updates accordingly. Or if we remove status and choose a project, we'll see that the projects get updated as well. Or let's view everything less than March of this year. So you can see this is working fairly well in that we have our 4 inputs from March that are basically above March 16th. And then one last check we'll do is we'll remove this filter and then we'll apply maybe the upper bounds of March of this year. So we'll say less than March 10th of 2023, and we would expect to see the rest of the columns show up. And then we'll check one last range and we'll check anything in between, let's say September 15th, 2021 and the 10th. So we would expect to see this record, this record, this record, 3 records here in our table, which we do here. So that's it. You can obviously do some cleanup on this. You know, one of the obvious things is going to be this edit button here in the filter. Remember, these are system actions, both the add and the edit button here. Those are system actions that are generated based off of the updatability of your table. And to remove these system actions, you just go to actions and expand the table that action is existing in and click on it. So in our case, it's going to be this filter table. So we can click on it and then just choose not display. And then when you save the app, this goes away and it's not in your table. Same with these arrows. These are basically arrows that allow you to jump between records in this detail view. So this is a common detail view. This is basically slideshow mode in a detail view. So you could turn that off as well. And you can see those went away. Then remember the benefit to using this method over the built-in method. There may be times where you just want to show the filter ability right for the user right away. You want to have it up front allow the user to see that they can filter those relatively easy. This condition is relatively tucked away and is not necessarily obvious to users, especially if they haven't used an AppSheet app before. And then the added benefit of this filter is you can combine it with multiple tables. So in this situation, I used one table, but if you have multiple tables that share similar functions, you can actually use this concept to filter and have a dashboard that presents all of the different tables from your app and have one filter to filter against all of those tables. So with that, thanks everybody for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And as always, have a good one.